The academy training ground was loud, filled with alien students from powerful families. Bright lights blinked overhead, training drones flew through the air, and instructors watched from towers above. In the center of the crowd, a small alien girl stood alone, holding a broken tool in her trembling hands. Her name was Luma. She was the smallest student in the entire class. Her skin was soft blue, her eyes large and glowing with quiet fear. She came from a forgotten village, far from the cities of the stars. No one knew how she even got accepted into the elite academy. Then came the laughter. It started with one voice, sharp, arrogant, loud. "You don't belong here, runt," shouted Zark, the top student. He had glowing armor, sharp teeth, and a voice that made others follow. Zark walked up to Luma and snatched the broken tool from her hands. "This," he smirked, waving it in front of everyone. "Did you steal this from the garbage dump, or is that your home too?" The crowd laughed, loud and cruel. Luma didn't say anything. She couldn't. Her throat tightened, and her fingers curled, but she stayed silent. She picked up the pieces of her device and turned to leave. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. Not in front of them, but someone else had seen everything. Someone who didn't laugh, someone who didn't move at all, but simply watched. A human man named Jake. He wore a janitor's uniform with dust on his shoulders and a mop in his hand. To most he was invisible, just another human doing cleanup in the alien world. But behind his calm eyes, something cold stirred. He had seen Zark before. Arrogant, rich, powerful. Jake had seen many like him in the war years ago, back when humans were still proving themselves in the galaxy. Jake leaned on his mop and followed Luma with his eyes. She walked to a quiet corner behind the supply bay. There, hidden from others, she sat down and pulled out the broken tool. Her hands moved slowly, carefully, trying to fix what had been crushed. Jake stepped closer, quiet as a whisper. He didn't speak, just watched her work for a moment. Then he said gently, "You're not bad with your hands." Luma jumped in surprise, but she didn't run. She looked up at him with wide eyes, unsure whether to speak. Jake crouched down and placed something next to her, a small, smooth device, round, glowing softly. It was not alien tech, it was human-made, rare and powerful in the right hands. "What is that?" she whispered. Her voice was soft, like the wind through broken glass. "Call it a gift," Jake replied. "It's old, but it listens better than most machines in this place." Luma hesitated, then reached out and touched it. The device lit up and made a soft chime, recognizing her touch. Her mouth opened in shock. Alien tech never responded to her, but this human thing did. Jake smiled just a little. He stood up and turned to leave. "Why are you helping me?" Luma asked suddenly, her voice shaking. Jake paused, then answered, "Because bullies don't stop until someone watches back." He walked away, leaving her with the strange device and new questions. But far above them, inside the glass control room, Zark stood watching too. He saw the human speak to her, saw the device glow. His eyes narrowed. A sneer formed on his face. "What is that human trash doing with her?" he muttered. Zark didn't like losing attention, and he especially didn't like being ignored. The next day would not be kind, but what none of them knew was that Jake had once commanded fleets, had once walked through fire and blood, and he had made a quiet promise. "This time, I'll protect the quiet ones." Rain fell gently on the steel rooftops of the academy, but inside the supply bay, the sound of metal tools clicking filled the quiet space. Luma sat alone again, her back curved, her fingers steady as they repaired the broken parts of her learning unit. But today her eyes were brighter, because today she had something no one else did. The strange round device the human gave her still glowed faintly. It pulsed like a heartbeat, warm and calm. Every time her hand touched it, the lights inside flickered and danced. It responded to her, just her, that had never happened before. She didn't understand how it worked, but she felt like it was listening. She whispered into it once, and it hummed gently in return. It was the first thing in the entire academy that didn't reject her. She didn't know where Jake had come from. He looked like just a janitor, always cleaning, always quiet. But something about his eyes told her there was more. They weren't eyes of someone who just cleaned floors. They were eyes of someone who had seen pain and done something about it. Across the hallway, behind a stack of crates, Jake leaned on a wall, arms crossed. He had returned to check on her, though he didn't plan to speak again. He simply watched, making sure no one bothered her this time. He had done what he could for now, just enough to give her hope, but the truth was, he had gone against his orders. Humans weren't supposed to interfere in elite alien academies. They were guests here, tolerated but not trusted, especially someone like him, someone with a past hidden under a false name and quiet job. Jake still remembered the message he had received the night before, a coded warning from an old war contact. Zark's father is watching. Be careful. One wrong move and you disappear. But Jake had seen too many disappear already. He had watched children cry under the weight of power they couldn't fight, and he had promised himself years ago never again. He didn't care if it was against the rules. Luma reminded him of someone he couldn't save before. He wouldn't fail again. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the hallway. Luma flinched and covered the device. Zark's voice followed soon after. "There she is, playing with garbage again," he said, stepping into the room with two of his friends behind him. He walked like he owned every wall he passed, like even the floor bent for him. Luma stayed silent, trying to hide the round device behind her back. Zark noticed, and his eyes narrowed. "What's that? Something shiny. You steal it from the scrap pile." Before she could respond, he stepped forward and grabbed her wrist, but the moment he touched her, the human-made device let out a high-pitched tone. Zark yanked his hand back, confused. What even is this?" Jake moved then, fast and silent. He didn't speak, didn't shout. He simply knocked over a heavy crate with a sharp kick, making a crashing sound that echoed like thunder. Zark and his friends jumped back. Startled, from the other side of the crates, Jake appeared, pushing a mop slowly. No anger in his face, no emotion, just tired eyes and a bored expression. "Careful," Jake said quietly. "These floors are wet." Zark's mouth twitched, unsure whether he was being mocked. He didn't want to get in trouble, not with cameras nearby, so he simply gave Luma a final glare and walked away, his ego slightly bruised. As his footsteps faded, Luma looked up at Jake. Her lips trembled and her voice came out soft. "Why did you do that?" Jake didn't answer right away. He just looked at her and said, "You should finish building that thing you're working on. Tomorrow might be a big day." He turned and walked away without another word. Luma sat frozen for a moment, then slowly looked down at the parts in front of her. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time she felt like she wasn't completely alone. Later that night, in her tiny sleeping pod, Luma held the device in her hand. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, human." On the other side of the campus, in the dark maintenance room, Jake pulled out a small case from under his bunk. Inside were old tools, strange tech, and a badge no one had seen in years. The mark of Earth's shadow soldiers, long thought to be disbanded. Jake stared at it for a while, then closed the case and whispered back, "Let's see how far you can go, little spark." The crowd had already gathered by the time Luma stepped onto the main training platform. Hundreds of students, instructors and guests stood around the circular stage, their eyes full of curiosity, some with boredom, many with mockery. A public demonstration was rare and everyone knew why this one was happening. It was Zark's idea. He had spoken to the instructors and convinced them Luma should be given a chance to prove her worth. He wore a polite smile when he said it, but everyone saw through the lie. This wasn't a chance. It was a trap. The instructors thought they were being fair, but Zark wanted a stage. He wanted Luma to fail in front of everyone, to crush her completely. Luma's hands trembled as she held her tiny device. It was something she'd worked on for weeks. Her design, her pieces, her sweat. With a little help from Jake's gift, the device now hummed softly in her palm. It was a drone controller, small and strange, unlike anything made by alien hands. It only worked when she touched it. Her eyes scanned the crowd and stopped when she saw Zark leaning on the rail, arms crossed, smirking. He nodded at her like she was a child about to sing the wrong note. Her heart pounded, but she took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Begin," said one of the instructors, his voice echoing through the speakers. 3 combat drones rose into the air above her, round, fast and dangerous. They were made to test control and focus. Each student was expected to guide the drones through moving hoops without crashing. Zark had done it with ease last year. Luma looked at her controller. The lights blinked slowly, waiting. She touched the center and whispered, "Please work." The first drone darted forward, shaky at first. The crowd leaned in. The drone wobbled, then corrected itself mid-air. Gasps broke out. It flew smoothly through the first 2 hoops. The second drone rose, followed by the third. All 3 moved like birds through wind, adjusting, spinning, dipping. Luma's fingers moved carefully, her mind focused. She had practiced late at night when no one watched. She had listened to Jake's quiet suggestions. Now it was working, not because of magic, but because someone had finally believed in her. The drones passed the final set of hoops without a single crash. The silence was louder than any applause. No one expected her to succeed. She looked up slowly, expecting anger or laughter, but what she saw was far worse. Zark's smile was gone. His eyes burned with something else now, not amusement, but hatred. He clapped slowly, once, twice, then stepped forward and raised a hand. "Impressive," he said, his voice calm, but suspicious. Luma froze. She knew what was coming. "No one from her class has ever passed this test on their first try," Zark continued, "and now she controls 3 drones with near-perfect precision." Murmurs began in the crowd. Instructors whispered among themselves. "She must have cheated," Zark said flatly. "Perhaps with help from a certain human." Every eye turned toward the corner where Jake stood, holding his mop. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just looked at Zark with the same tired eyes. An instructor asked, "Do you have any proof, Zark?" Zark hesitated, just for a second. Then he reached under the stage console and held up something, a small recording chip. It showed Luma working late at night in the supply room with Jake nearby. Whispers turned to gasps. The image on the screen didn't show cheating, but the suggestion was enough. Zark smiled again, a poisonous smile. "She's using human-made tools," he said. "Tools not authorized by the Academy." Luma felt her chest tighten. It was true. The device came from Jake, but she built it herself. She learned. She adapted. She didn't cheat. Jake stepped forward finally. His voice was soft, but every word cut clear. "Are you afraid of her, Zark?" The crowd went silent again. Zark's eyes flared with anger. "She used illegal help. She used intelligence." Jake interrupted. "Something you hide behind money and fear." A few students covered their mouths to hide their smiles. Zark's face turned red. He looked like he wanted to explode, but the instructors raised their hands. "This matter will be investigated," one said. "For now the demonstration is over." Luma stood still, barely breathing. Jake walked past her as if nothing had happened, but as he passed he whispered, "Don't stop, you're already winning." Luma clutched her device tighter. The crowd began to leave, some still whispering. Zark stayed behind, alone, his fists clenched at his sides. He had planned to humiliate her. Instead, she had stolen the spotlight, and the human had humiliated him instead. But he wasn't finished yet, not even close, and neither was Jake, because now he had drawn the attention of something far worse than Zark's family. The Academy's sky turned dark purple as the twin moons began to rise. Most students returned to their sleeping chambers, but the tension from the day still lingered in the halls like smoke. Luma sat in the engineering bay, her fingers still shaking slightly. She had flown the drones perfectly, but it didn't feel like a victory. Zark had poisoned everything. Her success was now called suspicious. Her achievement was under review, and everyone whispered that a human janitor might be behind it. She kept replaying the scene in her head, the way Jake stood in front of everyone without fear, the way he asked Zark, "Are you afraid of her?" No one had ever said something like that in public. Not to Zark, not with that voice. So calm, so steady, like he wasn't afraid of anything. But Luma didn't know what was happening behind the walls. She didn't know who was watching Jake now, and she didn't know that he had already been warned. In a small maintenance closet near the reactor core, Jake stood alone. The light was dim, the air warm. A small black device sat in his hand, blinking with a red signal, a message from someone he hadn't spoken to in years. "Your actions have been noted," the voice said. "Zark's father is a war general. He has influence. You're being watched." Jake didn't reply. He just stared at the blinking light. He had known this would happen eventually. He had broken the rule, the first rule he gave himself when he came here: stay invisible. But that was before he met the girl who reminded him of someone lost, before he saw her being mocked for being small, poor and smart. He reached into the wall and pulled out a hidden case. Inside were old objects from a life long buried. A folded Earth military badge, a worn photo of 5 soldiers, him and his team, and a small device that could hack into any alien system in under 10 seconds. He had once been Captain Jacob Reese of the Earth Shadow Division. Now he was just Jake the Cleaner. But the soldier in him had never really gone away. He stared at the photo. One of the faces in it was gone. She had died on a mission where he was too late to save her. She had big eyes, just like Luma, always believed in building, not fighting. Her voice still haunted him in quiet nights. Jake closed the case slowly. His face was calm, but his heart had fire again. If Zark's father wanted to play political games, then fine. But Jake had played real war. He knew what monsters looked like, and Zark wasn't even close yet. At the same time, Zark stood inside his family's private chamber. The walls were gold and black, filled with awards and weapons from past wars. His father stood before him, tall and cold, his eyes sharp like blades. You were embarrassed by a girl, the general said, and a human janitor. Zark gritted his teeth. She cheated. He helped her cheat. Doesn't matter, the general said, cutting him off. You let them outsmart you in front of everyone. Zark lowered his eyes. His father turned away and picked up a dark crystal from a case. Handle it quietly, he said. No more mistakes. Luma didn't sleep that night. She stared at the ceiling of her small dorm, holding her strange device tight in both hands. It still glowed softly. She didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow, but something in her heart told her this was far from over. In the morning she woke to find her locker broken into. All her tools were gone, and on the floor was her drone controller, smashed into pieces. She stood still, not blinking, then slowly knelt and picked up the broken parts. Her hands were gentle, but her breath was sharp. For the first time she didn't cry, she didn't run. She just stood up and walked out of the room with the broken pieces in her arms. Outside the dorms, Jake waited. He had seen the mess before anyone else, but he didn't stop her. He waited until she was beside him. They think they broke something, he said softly, but they don't understand. They just gave you your next challenge. Luma looked at him, tired but not defeated. What should I do now, she asked. Jake gave her a small chip, glowing with green lines. Build again, he said, but this time do it your way. She looked at the chip, then nodded slowly, and in that small moment, without noise or witness, a silent partnership formed, stronger than any rank. A broken girl and a quiet warrior, planning something no one expected, not even Zark, and certainly not his father. The Academy's lights flickered once, then twice. In the data towers, small warning lights began blinking red. No one paid attention at first. It looked like a glitch, a small power issue, something normal. But deep inside the system, something had been touched, something had been rewritten. In the shadows of the underground tunnel, Jake crouched next to a terminal only engineers used. A quiet hum echoed in the air as he slipped in a data spike. Lines of alien code flew across the screen, symbols twisting, then a soft beep. One file after another vanished from Zark's personal vault. Every drone test score, every copied project, every private message sent to black market suppliers gone, replaced by a single file named Coward. Jake didn't smile. He just stood up, pulled out the spike and walked away, leaving no trace. That morning, Zark arrived at the academy with his usual pride. He wore his golden training suit, his father's crest shining on his chest. Students greeted him, instructors nodded, but when he tried to open his tablet, his eyes widened. The screen blinked once, then showed a single image, a small drawing of Luma's face, with the words, "Pick on someone your own size." Zark's teeth clenched. He threw the tablet to the ground and stormed into the control office. No one had seen him this angry, not since he lost his first battle simulation years ago. Luma watched from the workshop, her new project spread before her. She didn't know what Jake had done, but she could feel the shift in the air. For the first time, no one whispered behind her back. No one called her names as she passed. They just watched quietly, confused, unsure. She worked without fear now, her hands moving fast, her mind clear. The chip Jake gave her glowed brighter every time she made progress. This one was different. Not just a drone controller, this was something smarter, something alive, a learning assistant core, Jake had called it, rare, banned in most alien systems, but powerful beyond limits. Luma didn't ask where he got it, she just built around it, and for the first time the machine didn't fight her, it helped. Jake watched her from across the room as he cleaned the floor slowly, each movement lazy on the outside, but inside his mind, every second counted. He knew Zark wouldn't stop. He had seen that kind of pride before. It didn't forget, and it didn't forgive. But Luma was stronger now, and Jake was making sure she had time to grow. He started dropping small toolkits near her desk, each with something rare, stolen from the scrapyards of fallen ships. She used everything, never wasting a single wire. She never asked for more, but Jake always left something new each night. One evening, as Luma connected the final link in her device, something strange happened. The tool spoke. It said her name in her own voice. She froze, then smiled. The assistant core had learned from her tone, her patterns. It wasn't just a machine anymore, it was hers. She called it Echo, and Echo responded to her like a friend. When she asked it to scan data, it did. When she needed guidance, it offered suggestions. Even the instructors noticed. One of them stopped by her desk and watched quietly. He asked her questions, genuine ones, and when she answered, he nodded with real interest. For once, her work wasn't mocked. it was respected. But not everyone was silent. Zark watched from the upper deck, his eyes like fire, his pride was now bleeding. People were beginning to talk about her, not him. He couldn't allow that. That night, while most slept, Zark broke into the Academy's archive chamber with stolen clearance. He had one goal: erase her from the system, fail her officially, destroy her name. No record, no proof, no future. But when he accessed the database, he found something new, a hidden file, locked under strange encryption. When he opened it, the screen showed one single sentence: "This system is now protected. Try again, and we'll erase you instead." Zark backed away in confusion. Then rage took over. He smashed the console with his fist and ran, his heart racing. Elsewhere, Jake leaned against a wall, a small screen in his hand showing Zark's face in low light. He had watched it all unfold. He sighed, placed the device back into his coat and whispered, "One more mistake, Prince, and you'll see how scary humans can be." The game was no longer one-sided. Luma had risen from nothing, and Jake, the forgotten soldier, was done hiding in the dark. Something was coming, something loud and public, and this time the whole galaxy would be watching. The banners of the Royal Science Fair fluttered in the wind, high above the Academy courtyard. Ships from across the galaxy had landed, bringing guests in glowing robes, jeweled armor, and shimmering skin. This was the day everyone waited for, the day young minds displayed inventions before rulers, generals, and guildmasters. A single victory here could open doors no common test ever could. Luma stood near the entrance, holding her creation close, wrapped in dark cloth. She wasn't supposed to be here. Weeks ago, her name wasn't even on the list, but something had changed. One of the judges had received a strange file anonymously. It showed a quiet girl using tools no one had ever seen, building something no one could explain. The judge overruled the objections, and Luma was in. Her hands were steady now. She didn't shake like before. She didn't hide behind corners or avoid looking people in the eyes. Echo, her smart device, rested inside the case like a heartbeat, ready to activate at her command. But somewhere deeper in the crowd, Zark waited. He didn't wear his usual smile, not today. This wasn't about teasing anymore. It was about revenge. Behind him stood one of his family's hired tech agents, a tall alien with black glass eyes and metal fingers. The agent carried a small disruptor cube, hidden beneath his coat. Its job was simple: overload Luma's device the moment she powered it on. Nothing violent, nothing permanent, just enough to make her fail in front of everyone. Zark whispered to the agent, "Do it during her first demo. Make it look like a glitch." The man nodded and vanished into the sea of guests. Jake moved through the crowd with his mop cart. He wasn't scheduled to be here today. He wasn't supposed to even be near the stage, but he had changed the duty list last night and inserted himself. No one noticed. No one ever looked at the janitor. From under his cart, he slid open a hidden drawer and checked his tracking device. He had tagged the disruptor tech 2 nights ago, just in case. Now the signal blinked near the stage. Jake's eyes narrowed. The speakers buzzed and the fair began. One by one, students displayed floating sculptures, magnetic armor, energy-weaving tools. People clapped, nodded politely, and moved on. Then came her name, soft and almost skipped. Luma of Class C, entry accepted. She stepped onto the silver platform, holding her case with both hands. The judges barely looked up. The audience didn't cheer. They didn't expect anything from the smallest girl in the school. She placed the device gently and tapped its top. Echo awakened with a soft chime, lights dancing across its surface like water under stars. A thin projection appeared above it, rotating, changing shape, responding to Luma's voice without delay. She gave a short command, and the projection turned into a living model of the Academy. Then she spoke again, and it became a battlefield, showing troop paths, energy flow, structural weaknesses. One of the judges leaned forward, whispering something to another. Echo wasn't just a tool, it was a learning engine, a thinking machine, and it was listening in real time. Zark watched from a distance, clenching his jaw. He nodded at the agent, who raised the disruptor cube. He pressed it, but nothing happened. Confused, he pressed it again, still nothing. Then a soft voice came from his earpiece. "Looking for this?" The agent turned his head slowly. Jake stood right behind him, holding up a shattered disruptor cube, its inside sparking quietly. He didn't smile. He didn't speak again. He just stared. The agent backed away and disappeared into the crowd. Jake returned to his cart like nothing happened, just in time to hear the crowd begin to clap. Luma stood on stage, nervous but proud. The judges nodded. A few even smiled. One of them asked, "Where did you learn to build something like this?" Luma opened her mouth, paused, then said simply, "I just learned." No mention of Jake, no lie either, just the truth, her truth. As she stepped down, Zark stood in her way, his face cold, his voice low. "You think this changes anything?" Luma looked up at him. "No," she said, "but it's a start." She walked past him, Echo still glowing in her arms. Zark didn't move, didn't speak. For the first time, he was completely silent. Up in the judge's balcony, one of the royal officers turned to the Academy's headmaster. "Keep your eye on that girl," he said. "She may be more important than any of us thought." And in the far back, Jake leaned against a wall, his job done, his secret safe for one more day. But he knew this wasn't the end. Zark had lost again, and people like him didn't lose quietly. Something bigger was coming, something public, and if they wanted to tear her down again, they'd have to go through a human first. Rain fell over the Academy as the celebration ended. The lights were still bright, the guests still talking, but the storm above had arrived without warning. Luma sat quietly on the edge of the stage, her invention in her lap, her thoughts far away. She had done everything they asked, built something no one could explain, proved herself without begging, without cheating. But even now, something inside her felt unsettled. Zark had disappeared from the event before the last judge spoke. No one had seen him leave, and that was never a good sign. Far below the main courtyard, the emergency sirens began to glow, silent but pulsing red. Security doors across the Academy clicked into lockdown mode one by one. Only a few noticed, mostly guards and engineers. Jake noticed too. He always noticed first. He dropped his mop and walked to the corner of the building. Behind a false wall, he opened a secret panel and pulled out a device with earth markings burned into the metal. He pressed it once. A green light blinked. Scanning, searching, warning. 2 minutes later, the message came. Zark has triggered the internal override. He's locked down the stage dome. Jake's eyes sharpened. Luma was still inside, alone. Up above, the dome began to hum. The lights flickered once. Then a blue force field surrounded the main platform, trapping only one person inside. Gasps broke out in the crowd. Students ran back. Guards shouted. The judges demanded answers from the Academy's system, but nothing responded. And then Zark's voice echoed from the speakers, cold and full of rage. "You all cheered for her. You all believed her little lies. But let's see how clever she is without her toy." From the edge of the roof, Zark stepped into view, holding a small black controller in one hand. He pressed it once, and Luma's device Echo shut down completely. The lights died. The projections vanished. Luma stood still, her eyes wide. Zark jumped down onto the platform with her, protected by the force field. He didn't wear his usual smile. There was no audience charm left, only pure, bitter jealousy. Jake was already moving. He grabbed a hidden tool from his cart and sprinted toward the field's outer edge, but the security guards pulled him back. "You can't go in there, it's sealed." Jake stared at the force field, then looked up. "I'm not asking permission." He moved to the control tower, kicked open the panel, and shoved his earth tool into the socket. The alien system resisted, but only for a second. Then the old human tech took over. On the stage, Zark walked slowly toward Luma. "You're nothing without that device," he said. "You never belonged here." Luma held Echo in her hands, trying to reboot it, whispering, "Come on, please, wake up." Zark raised his voice. "Say something clever now, little spark." He lifted his foot and moved to smash Echo into the floor, but before he could, the force field dropped with a loud buzz, and Jake was already there. He stepped between them like a wall. Zark froze. Jake didn't say a word at first. He looked down at the small device, then back at Zark. "You really can't stand losing to someone smaller than you," Jake said finally. "She beat you with brains, so now you bring fists." Zark laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She had help," he spat. "You gave her everything." Jake stepped forward. "I gave her tools," he said. "She built the rest herself. That's more than you've ever done." Zark swung at him without warning. Jake dodged easily, grabbed his arm, twisted, and dropped him to the floor with one move. The crowd behind the field gasped again. Zark groaned, unable to move. Jake turned to Luma and handed her back Echo. "I rerouted the signal," he said softly. "It's yours again." She touched it, and the lights returned, slow and gentle. The device came back to life, glowing like it had never stopped. Luma looked up at Jake, confused. "Who are you really?" Jake smiled. "Just a little. Just someone who used to lose to," he said. "But not today." The guards arrived and dragged Zark away. He didn't speak, didn't fight. His father would not be able to cover this one up. Too many witnesses, too many recordings. Later that evening, Luma was called to the council chamber. They offered her a full sponsorship, access to labs across the stars, a future she had only dreamed of. She accepted quietly. But before she left the academy, she walked to the supply bay one last time. Jake stood there, mop in hand, pretending to clean. She hugged him without saying a word, and he let her. No rank, no orders, no reward, just thanks. Then she whispered, "You always watched my back." Jake looked at her and nodded. Someone had to. And as she left for the stars, he returned to the shadows, where quiet heroes always wait, watching just in case the next small spark needs help lighting up the dark.